The darkness in the name Iran. When missiles awaken prophecy, behind the weapons are ancient spirits. When the world reaches the crossroads of history, is this the final sign? It's not just about Israel, it's about you. Return before every door closes. Not everyone realizes when the final chapter begins. Because it doesn't arrive with trumpets, it doesn't carry breaking news. There's no red stamp saying this is the day of destiny. It comes quietly like a breeze passing across the screen. Like a small message among hundreds of meaningless updates. A single line: Iran just launched missiles at Israel. Some scroll past, some worry. Some move on to another headline. But somewhere else in a realm higher than any tower, a scroll is opening, a seal has been broken. And what was written from the beginning begins to shift. Welcome to Prayer Station. You think you're just watching the news. But in truth, you are standing inside a scene from a vision. Not in a movie, but in reality, not a rumor, but the words of prophecy coming alive like sacred breath poured into history. The world calls it conflict, God calls it a signal, a reminder that the 1,000-year script is reaching its climax. A warning that heaven's silence is not absence, but patience nearing its edge. You are living in the days when everything written is coming into view. No longer the future, but the present. No longer a distant warning, but a shaking happening before your eyes. And if that is true, then you are no longer a bystander. You have stepped into a doorway that cannot be reversed. A journey with no way out for those who want to stay still. A quiet voice that cannot be ignored. A bell that rings not from earth, but from the throne of heaven. The question is, can you hear it, or are you still sleeping through the sirens? If you can still hear, then please do not turn away. Because what is about to appear is not news that fades in seconds, but the first crack in the shell of peace you once believed would last. It is not only a warning to the world, it will knock at the very doorstep of your soul. And once your heart opens, you will never be the same. Because this is not just war between two nations, but a collision between heavenly realms, and you will be the witness, the darkness in the name. Iran, the 3 letters, I-R-A-N, seem like just the name of a country, but in the spiritual realm that name is echoed many times like a reverberation from an unrested past. It once had another name, an older name, a more resounding one. Persia was not only an empire that ruled half the world. It was a symbol of a rebellious spirit, a hidden current flowing through the ages, always aimed in one direction: to destroy the sacred things chosen by the Lord. In Persia, a man named Haman drew up a plan to wipe out the entire Jewish people from the earth, not by war, but by a royal decree, a seal. Also in Persia, a young woman stood up. No army, no weapons, only the courage of a heart touched by God. Esther stepped into the place no one dared to enter. And there, history changed course. But the frightening thing is not that this story happened, it's that it is repeating. Today's Iran carries the same shadow. Same land, same spirit, but now, it no longer hides, it is rising. not just as a nation, but as a form of darkness that has never been fully deciphered since the beginning. A darkness once unmasked under King Xerxes, but now dressed in modern garments, armed and once again gazing at Israel with the eyes of the old Haman. This time it does not use a royal court, it uses technology, not a seal, but missiles. But the goal remains unchanged. The covenant people must be extinguished. And if you see that happening, then you are not just reading history. You are witnessing a history that never truly ended, because that darkness has never slept. And if now it is shifting, then perhaps the light is preparing to appear, but that light, where will it come from? And more importantly, are you in the place where the light will pass through? If you're not sure, then walk with me. Because what's coming will no longer be darkness rising, but prophecy, unfolding layer by layer like pages freshly unsealed. When missiles awaken, prophecy. When missiles begin to fall in the promised land, the world calls it war. Experts appear on screens analyzing strategy, predicting retaliation, calculating losses. But no one asks a simple question: why now and why there? Because if you listen with your heart, not just with your ears, you will hear another sound beneath the explosions. An ancient but sacred sound, like the knocking of a scroll being opened in the hands of the Almighty. When a nation like Iran suddenly steps out of the shadows, launching hatred through iron, fire, and steel. When Israel, the land of promise, once again becomes the center of sorrow, it is not merely politics. It is a wake-up bell in the spiritual realm, because there were words spoken thousands of years ago that a time would come when nations of the East would rise against the covenant. That some would think they lead, but do not know they are just pawns in the hand of destiny. Iran thinks they are choosing the moment, but in truth heaven set the hour, because prophecy does not unfold by man's will. It unfolds at the moment when heaven nods. And that moment is now. You don't need to read the entire Bible to feel this. You only need to look at the news cycle. The whole world is spinning around. And ask yourself, why is everything revolving around a land smaller than a large city? Why do all powers want to lay hands on that land, and why? Every time Israel is touched, not only borders shake, but the soul of mankind begins to tremble, because prophecy has never been a tale of the past. It is a living current, and every time a missile launches from the east, it is like finger pointing to a sentence written before the foundation of the world, that all things will return to 1.1 land, one people, one king. And if that is true, then what you are witnessing today is not the beginning of war, but the final chapter of a sacred symphony where every note has already been written and is now playing for the last time. But what happens next is not found in the headlines. It is written in a word engraved deep within the book of the Most High. When Israel is not just a nation. When people look at Israel, they often see only a small strip of land wedged between loud, angry powers ready to ignite. They call it a hotspot, an epicenter, a land of controversy. But in truth, Israel has never been just a nation. From the moment that name was first spoken in the desert, it was never just a geographic location. It was a living promise. A sacred mark engraved in the heart of time, bound to blood, tears, and the glory of an everlasting covenant. It is the place where a father was called to leave his country without a map, without an address. Only a gentle yet irresistible voice saying, "Go." It is the place where lineages were established not by military might, but by faith in what had not yet been seen. And it is also the place where all the fury of hell began to shift its aim. not because that people were strong, but because they carried a name that cannot be erased, a name that makes the invisible powers tremble whenever it is spoken with reverence. Iran does not hate Israel because Israel is a military threat. They fear because Israel is a living witness to what many forces have tried to erase from human memory, that God has a people, a covenant and a plan that cannot be replaced. That is why the history of the world always revolves around that tiny land. That is why every empire from Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, all collided with Israel before they fell. Because in the unseen realm, Israel is not a country, it is a reminder. A sacred scar carved into the map of the world, not letting the nations forget that there is a sovereign and he still remembers what he promised. And that is also why war begins there, why every prophecy points back there, and why every time Israel is touched, heaven begins to move. Not because of Israel, but because of the one behind them. And if you still think this is a political conflict, then perhaps you are seeing through earthly eyes. But if you pause, open your heart, and let your soul listen, you will feel something vibrating in the air. Because that land is not just receiving missiles. It is preparing for the arrival of the King who will reign from Jerusalem itself. And if that is true, then you cannot just watch from afar. Because what is stirring in the darkness is not war, but a prophecy that has been dormant for generations and now is rising like ash, about to burst into flame, calling the names of those who can still hear the voice from eternity. Behind the weapons are ancient spirits. Then let me take you into the next deeper layer of the vision, where the unseen begins to collide with history, where the line fades between the material world and the sacred programs. Now awakening missiles may be the first thing you see, but in the spiritual realm they are not weapons, they are signals. Because every time Israel is attacked, it is not just a border conflict, but an invisible call echoing from eternity. Look again at the plan of the Almighty. There were prophets who spoke of this long ago, that a time would come when nations would begin to move without knowing they were being led. That armies would rise without realizing they were paving the way for something greater than victory. And now, when Iran aims its firepower at Israel, when sirens echo across the holy cities, what is happening is not just the result of hatred. It is a direct reaction to a covenant signed not with ink, but with blood. Not on paper, but with the word of the one who never breaks his promise. The enemy does not need to understand that covenant, they only need to sense its presence. And it is that very presence that compels them to rise. Like Haman could not accept the existence of Mordecai. Like Pharaoh could not endure the cries of slaves in prayer. Like Satan cannot stand still when the holiness of God is present somewhere. Missiles are not the objective. Missiles are the reaction. An instinctive reaction of darkness when exposed by light. And if Iran is stirring, it is not because they see Israel as weak, but because they sense Israel is drawing near to something sacred, a fulfillment, a destined hour, a manifestation that will shift the order of the world. Do you feel it? Do you feel like something in the air is growing heavier, as if every piece of news now carries the echo of something beyond what eyes can see? Because if you can still feel it, then you are standing in the right place, right on the edge between reality and prophecy. Because from within that land where every stone holds the memory of covenants, something that has never happened is about to appear again, not to answer the world, but to awaken even the souls that have slept in the shadows. When the world reaches the crossroads of history, an explosion, a pillar of smoke rising from the midst of the Holy Land, a wave wave of retaliation follows with the screech of missiles, blazing red headlines, and uneasy gazes from every capital on Earth. News spreads in seconds, updates every minute. Speculations by the hour. The world is moving, but no one stops to ask. Why do all global tremors always begin from a land smaller than a single state? Why not Paris? Why not Beijing? Why not New York? Why is it that through every generation, all historical earthquakes seem to converge on the same coordinates called Israel? The answer is not in war rooms, not in stockpiles or speeches, but in an ancient book dismissed by men yet never proven wrong. A book never written for fantasy but for reality. And the chapter you are living in now is the final chapter. You think you are a spectator watching the world collapse through a phone screen. But in truth, you are standing on the stage. You are part of the final scene that prophecy wrote before light ever existed. Every time you hear of war, every time a nation reacts, every time the world reaches an unprecedented moment, an ancient seal trembles. Heaven knocks softly on the door of your soul and asks, "Are you still awake?" Because every movement now is no longer coincidence, no longer random. They are signals. Signals that the patience of God is reaching its limit. And those who have eyes to see are beginning to watch the horizon blur. Not because darkness is spreading, but because glory is approaching from a direction mankind never expected. But not everyone can see it. Only those who are quiet enough, hungry enough, broken enough to bow their heads and look upward will realize what's coming is no longer history, but the final glory before the scroll closes forever. And right here at the crossroads of history, between the roar of weapons and the whisper of the Spirit, your soul must choose its path. Is this the final sign? We once heard of war as something of the past, something that happened when mankind had not yet learned how to speak to one another, when hatred was passed through spears and silence marked the end of peace. But then, in the middle of the modern century, with satellites circling the skies and technology surpassing the dreams of our ancestors, war returned without knocking, without permission, without needing a reason. It does not happen in one place. It happens everywhere all at once. It no longer wears the old image, but is cloaked in new layers, armed with metal networks and souls grown cold. Nation rises against nation, kingdom against kingdom. The earth trembles, the sky burns red. The globe feels like a body burning with fever, and no one knows if the fever comes from the soul or from the core. They say this is the cycle of history, but history has never repeated like this. A modern world, yet as unstable as ancient times, a humanity that calls itself advanced, yet as lost as a child in the wilderness, and in the middle of that chaos when Iran aims missiles at the land once called holy. This is no longer a military act, it is a knocking. The sixth knock, a knock that makes the seals begin to tremble in the unseen realm. Not everyone hears that sound because it does not come through loudspeakers, it does not ring in headlines, it passes through the soul like a breath from heaven, awakening those who still tremble before holiness. Because every seal has been written, every opening has its appointed time. And now something is slowly breaking the final seal. Not by human hands, but by the will of heaven can you feel that shaking. Not in politics, but in the spirit, not outside, but deep within your own heart. Something is changing and you know it cannot be undone. So if the final seal truly has been broken, then what awaits on the other side? And more than that, is your soul truly ready to face it? Because what comes next will no longer be announced. It will happen like lightning tearing across a cloudless sky, and there will be no time left to choose a side. It's not just about Israel, it's about you. You think this is a story about Israel, a distant land where conflict never ends, a people wrapped in religious and political controversy spanning millennia. A news story you can skip after a few seconds on the screen. But if you pause, you'll realize this is not just their story, because every time that land is touched, it's not only Israel's borders that tremble, but a fracture runs straight through the heart of humanity. Because among all the nations on earth, Jerusalem has never just represented geography. It is a mirror reflecting both the light and the darkness within the human soul. And if every prophecy is taking shape, if every sign is pointing toward the end of days, then you cannot stand outside the story, because you've already been written into it, not by bloodline, but by choice. Before the foundation of the world, the Creator designed a plan not only for Israel, but for every seeker of truth, every thirst for righteousness, and every soul willing to return when they hear the quiet call from the spiritual realm. You think you are just an observer, but in truth you carry a position, a part not yet read from the vision greater than any map. Because when the final seals are opened, all boundaries will be erased. Bloodline will no longer be the standard. Only one question remains. Where is your heart turned toward? You may not know Hebrew, never kept the Passover, belonged to no synagogue, but if your soul has ever grown still at the sound of prophecy, if your eyes have ever wept at the mention of a coming king, if your heart has ever trembled at the thought of eternity, then you have been called not by man, but by the one who wrote your name before time began. And if you are still listening, then that door is not yet closed. And in this very moment you can still step in, not to become Jewish, but to become part of the eternal promise. For every soul that bows before the truth, return before every door closes. There are doors not built by human hands, but by the breath of the Creator. They do not creak like old wooden gates. They do not open and close based on the opinions of the world. They move only when the appointed time arrives, and that time is drawing near. No longer signs, no longer repeated warnings, no longer faint tremors on the edge of history, but a complete shift in the spiritual realm as the patience of God reaches its final threshold. The chosen people will no longer stay silent. They will rise, not with weapons, but with eyes opened, with feet that find the ancient path again, with souls that remember the first call from the wilderness. And when they rise, the earth will tremble, not because they are strong, but because the one with them cannot be defeated. You may stand outside every human argument. You may refuse to take sides in political battles. But when heaven moves, no one is allowed to stay neutral, because on that day, light will not ask how much you understood. It will simply shine on where you are standing. And if you are still turned away, you will only see your shadow stretching long into eternal silence. You think there is still time, but heaven's clock does not count by the solar calendar. It counts by brokenness, by repentance, by the whisper of the Spirit in those whose hearts are no longer hardened. No one knows exactly when the King will come, but you will feel it, because before he descends, your soul will begin to tremble like the first flute touched by sacred wind. And in that moment, the question will no longer be, did you understand no longer? Have you done enough good no longer? Did you defend any faith on social media? The only question will be, did you bow? Because on that day, only those who know how to bow will be lifted up when the King appears in glory. But those who still stand on the pride of reason will not be able to remain under the light of holiness. And if in this very moment you can still hear that invitation, then the door is not yet shut. Come home before every door disappears in the sound of the final thunder. If what you just heard awakens something in your heart, please do not keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone standing at a crossroads of faith. And if you want to keep walking through sacred visions and revelations never taught before, subscribe to this channel, because what is coming will not wait for anyone.